It was an epic contest in the Big Freeze at the G. Have the Dees found a chink in the Pies' armour? We'll put the spotlight on the teams that stumbled at the weekend, plus how far can the Bombers go? We'll unpack all of that and more. This is Access All Areas, thanks to Crypto.com.
Mike Crummett spins it around the body. The Texas 10. Back to Caldwell on the Menzies. Bombers on fire.
From untenable to 10 in a row. Port powers on. 60 goals as a Magpie. He kicks one against them.
Great to have your company on this Tuesday. Damian Barrett and Matthew Lloyd with me. Hope you both had a lovely long weekend.
It was a long weekend, wasn't it? And another round of footy starts in a couple of days' time.
I know, it's crazy to think, but the more footy, the better, I say. So let's get straight into it, and we start with the King's birthday clash yesterday. The Dees toppling the Pies, and it was an enthralling contest. It went right down to the wire. How did the Dees do it, though, Lloydie?
It was one of my favourite games of the year, to be honest. It felt like a final, in June, and I thought their pressure was outstanding. So apart from the first 15 minutes where Collingwood kicked a couple of goals and they didn't get the game on their terms whatsoever, Melbourne had a set-up behind the ball which didn't allow for Collingwood to get that run-and-gun game going, and they really struggled having to kick down the line and played into the hands of May and Gawn and Grundy. So it's something for the rest of the competition to look at, that if you can slow that run down, it's easier said than done. You take out the small forwards of Collingwood and the Myercheck types who aren't those big power forwards.
Do you? I don't want to talk it down, Lordo, but the last 2 weeks, Carlton last week for Melbourne and Collingwood yesterday, they've only managed 8 goals in both those contests. Is it a problem, or do you actually look on the positive out of it and that they managed to win a game against Collingwood with just 8 goals?
I'd been critical of Melbourne and their scoring ability, but yesterday was 8 goals, 18. So they created so many chances. They just kicked poorly. So the scoreboard actually flattered Collingwood with what the game was like yesterday.
I mean, you talked about Collingwood's run-and-gun game and they couldn't get that going. They did look off. Was it more that they were off, or was it the way that Melbourne structured up and didn't allow them to get that free-flowing game going?
Yeah, I think some would say it's a combination of both, but I think just the Melbourne were so good. Like it's the best game I've seen Melbourne play in 18 months.
Yep.
Like that's how good they were. Probably since they were 10-0 last year, this is the best game I've seen Melbourne play, where they took the strengths away from a team. And not many teams can sustain the effort against Collingwood. Eventually they get you. But Melbourne sustained it for 4 quarters and brought upon errors from Collingwood players you just do not expect to see. They panicked. They panicked in this game of footy due to the system of Melbourne and the pressure of Melbourne.
And then you get to it all and they've lost a game of footy by a kick. So clearly there's some positives for the Pies. And to get to this stage where they now enter their bye, to having only lost twice, back in round 4 against Brisbane Lions, yesterday to Melbourne, you take that every single season.
But what I'll say about Collingwood, though, is you often they win these games by a kick every time. They just win them, and I don't think you review close wins as hard as you should. And this is a loss, though, where they go, OK, let's look at where they got us, and maybe it's something that could help them in the long run, because normally they get out of jail, and they would have got out of jail if they won that game. So I think McRae will review this one pretty hard.
So that referencing you've made of the kick down the line to the forwards, McStay has to come back in now. Yeah,
no doubt. I thought Ash Johnson was subbed out. He was really disappointing. Reece McInnes looked way off the pace. Hoskin Elliott was poor. Myercheck probably had the worst game we've ever seen him play. So that's something for the rest of the competition to see. As I said, Brisbane have probably been the only team that did it to an extent. And then Melbourne yesterday did it to the best I've seen any team play against Collingwood.
It was a huge game for the Dees, but an even bigger game, I guess, for Brodie Grundy coming up against his former side in Collingwood for the very first time. And during the week, it was Max Gawn who said he was going to give Brodie Grundy the first centre bounce, Damo, but he started on the bench. It was such an anticlimax.
It was massive theatre about it, wasn't it? I mean, and the quotes that have gone to Nat to even say that Brodie asked me, and I'm going to grant him permission, and then you see him start on the ground. I love it. In the bigger picture and the bigger storyline around, I thought it was really clever, actually, to just remove him from that heat at the moment. Now, it doesn't matter, and we saw how he worked his way into the game, and this ruck combination, it is a point of difference. It's still a work in progress. It may take 2 years for it to bed down, but I mean, we're kicking goals like this at key stages in the third quarter. He finally got his kicking accuracy on track. It's I think it's a bonus for them, and it's a massive key to what they're doing this year.
I thought, Nat, the way the game was played again, as we just touched on, it's the best I've seen the two of them work together. So the more it can become a grind, the more those two are so good in the air behind the footy.
Now, straight after the siren, something caught a few of our eyes, and it was post-match Christian Petrarca and Mason Cox exchanging words. It looked quite heated, Damo. We've gone through the whole tape of that final quarter and we can't actually find an incident. It's just maybe a bit of lip.
Yeah, and I mean, Chris Petrarca is what happens on the field stays on the field type of operator, and I imagine that's where it will stay from his perspective. Again, we have had people here go through the entire game, Matt, and couldn't see anything was obvious to the outsider. So who knows? But again, more theatre.
Of course, yesterday was more than just a game of footy. Of course, Fight MND, the Big Freeze 9. Who was your favourite slider? That was mine, Mick Fanning. Did you both have a favourite?
I love Michelle Payne, and I love the soft spot for the Chief too, going down as Aquaman. But Taylor Harris there, dressed as Sam Kerr.
For me, it was Tony Shaw. I just loved how good he is, Tony. Yeah, he was outstanding. Tony.
He stayed in character too, the face. He was trying to rev up the crowd and get them to chant
Chief.
Beetlejuice. That hair.
Yeah, he looks good with hair, Chief.
Luscious, absolutely luscious.
And then the Hollywood superstar just capped it off, didn't he? Going down as
Stevie is the Hulk pushing her down. Now, Carl Dietrich, I reckon most people under the age of 40 had no idea who Eric Banner was.
No, it's a fair point, but the people who were over 40 that did know, and it was a great moment. But as was this, where the two teams came together before the game started. It was half planned and it had an organic feel to it, and it's just another layer, Lordo and Nat, isn't it, to this now incredible day on the AFL calendar. Yeah,
it was a beautiful, touching moment there. Now, Sunday night, a huge game between two rivals, Essendon and Carlton, and in the third term there was a Bomber blitz, Lloydie, because the Bombers kicked 7 goals to 2 in that term.
Yeah, I thought the first quarter was all the Bombers, second quarter was all Carlton, but both teams couldn't put it on the scoreboard, and then they're the type of team that they're playing the right brand of football. They've got a great mix of contest, but then, if you give them time and space, they'll just burn you on the outside. And they kicked 7 goals to 2 in this quarter. Peter Wright was back. Merritt was just exquisite in the third quarter when he was pushed forward because of the Curnow tag. And this is the issue for Carlton. They can't score. They don't have a connection, yet the Bombers do. And they had a lot of young kids who did the job. Perkins beat Cripps. Hobbs had a fantastic game.
Yep.
It was outstanding.
And what I love with this game was the flicking of the switch component in the third quarter in that very old school way. And the person on the end of a lot of it, and here's Redmond having another great season, but Peter Wright at the very end of it, Lotto, to do what he did first up for the season after serious shoulder surgery, to present physically as he did, but to impact with the 5 goals. I think that acquisition now, or that re-entry of Wright, allows them, I think, to dream pretty high now.
Yeah, I think so too. And they've been crying out to be coached and coached well for a long, long time. And they've got a guy in Brad Scott who's giving them the direction that they've been crying out for, Nat, and they're a very happy club.
So are we Bomber believers here?
Yeah, I am. But I mean, it's a contextual belief, isn't it? I mean, I'm not talking prelim final belief, but I'm talking make finals and win a final belief at this stage, yeah.
I don't think the comp's that good this year. I think there's 4 sides at the top who look like a clear top 4, but then St Kilda are currently 5th, and there's no reason the Bombers couldn't beat. So, so I think if they can keep things going in a healthy injury list, that they could win a final.
So Freo, Port, Adelaide, Geelong, Western Bulldogs. We're going to know. We can probably answer that question with a bit more clarity at the end of that 5-week stretch.
Well, what about Carlton? Because they're in the bottom 4. They've lost 8 of their last 9, and 2 years after a football department review, it is another flop of a season, Damo. They're basically irrelevant.
Yeah, it's a stunning fall, isn't it? To lose the last 4 games of last season, as we know, and the final 2 games of that season lost by a kick, and then to end up after round 13 in 4th last position on the ladder with no hope of making finals and no hope of anything positive happening out of a season that began with a lot of hope and positivity. So I'm one, Lordo, to not subscribe to the need to sack the coach element to it. I don't think it's going to fix their problems if they were to do that. I understand the narrative around it. I understand the conversations being had, Nat, behind the scenes. Forget what they're saying publicly. This is a live decision as to whether he does coach in 2024. But to me, I think there's bigger problems, and they relate to the list, I think, as much as anything at the moment.
But it's better than what the list is better than the bottom 4 side, though, don't you think?
Well, the latter wouldn't say so. And if you go back to round...
They should be doing far better because they've got so much talent, Lloydie.
Well, again, that does get to the conversation. The high end is fine. They've got 2 Coleman medalists, a Brownlow medalist, the potential another Brownlow medalist in Walsh, but then the bottom 6 to even 10,
but their high-end players aren't playing well either. So I think it's a combination of a lack of confidence, lack of belief in the system. It's just all fallen apart for them.
I really feel for Blues fans at the moment, but not all of them have lost hope. And I know neither of you are Ted Lasso watchers and fans, which you need to get on it. And you see this fan here holding up the Believe sign. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And I think the Carlton board need to look at something a little bit different. And Ted Lasso is available. Maybe the Richmond way might suit something at Carlton. That's all I'm saying. You two need to go on and watch it. But everyone else will know what I'm talking about.
So you're still believing is what you're saying?
No, I'm not, but that is the motto of the Richmond Football Club in Ted Lasso, and I think maybe they need to harness a little bit of that way. Let's talk about the MCG on Saturday. There was a massive upset. It was the Hawks over the Lions, and there are 3 big issues I want to address with you two. The first with the Lions is their key defence, because it was a problem for them in September last season, and then on the weekend it was Mitch Lewis and Jacob Kazitsky who got a hold of them. What do you reckon, Lloyd?
I'm not so concerned about the back line. I thought the way Hawthorn moved the footy, like you can't stop this pass, for example. I thought that was just a chain of handballs down the field. I think Payne's had a good year. Andrews can have his bad days, but he also has some brilliant days. So, no, I thought the midfield was beaten. The forward line, Cameron and Danaher were bitterly disappointing on the day as well. Neil was well held by Connor Nash. So, this is obviously Connor McKenna, who's just outsized, but no, I'm not too concerned about the back line.
And before we move off this aspect of this conversation, Nat, Mitch Lewis, Lordo, to me, he seems to be tracking as well as anyone can for his age and stage. Do you have him in the high bracket when it's all flushed through and he establishes himself?
I think he's picked 70 or something, wasn't he? Yeah. So, I don't have him in the top bracket yet, but there's no reason why he can't get there,
Now, Chris Fagan would have thought that the discussions about the MCG record were done and dusted after they broke the hoodoo against Melbourne in September last year. But after the loss to the Hawks, it's reared its ugly head again, Damo. 1 win in the last 14.
Yeah.
It is a real issue.
It is, and they can get as grumpy, and Chris Fagan can get the chest out and not want to engage in conversations about it, but it's a fact, Nat, and until they rectify it, we're going to raise it, and we are going to raise it when they come up against a team that they were meant to win, and we're very short price favourites to do so. So, another problem for them, clearly.
Round 18, they have Melbourne, their last opportunity there, so they want to win that one if they're any chance of winning this year's premiership.
Well, especially they need to finish top 2 if they don't want to play at the G as often. The third thing I want to address is Jack Gunston. Unfortunately, just out of form at the moment, Lloydie. 11 goals in 11 games. He's averaging 5 marks and 9 disposals. He really hasn't set the world alight. Do they need to, I don't know, send him back to the Magoos?
I think as a forward, once you lose your speed, you're in trouble, and that ping in the legs. And to me, Jack Gunston looks to have lost the speed and the ping that gets you away from any defender. So it was actually quite sad watching him play on Saturday afternoon, where he just can't get off his opponent. And apart from an uncontested mark up the field, he doesn't look dangerous inside 50.
And that in the context of what Ken Hinkley's doing at Port Adelaide, by leaving out his captain, Tom Jonas, not just for 1 week, but now 2 weeks in a row, and to make that call and then to deliver that news to his captain, line that up with what other clubs are doing. And I don't want to make Jack Gunston the focus of that, but other clubs, i.e. Port Adelaide, are making tough calls in that hard-to-make space when it comes to greats of the game out of form.
All right, down in Tassie on Sunday, it was the Giants that got the win over the Kangaroos, and it was a pretty even contest until late in that third term when Toby Green just went bang in a 3-minute burst of brilliance, Lloydie.
Is there a guy, Damo, that's won more games for his team in, say, the last 5 years than this guy? Like, genuinely wins them off his own back?
No, there's not, Lordo, and it's a great point to raise, and what we're seeing here happen in the third quarter, away from the final siren, but there are moments within the games that are, as you say, winning the game for GWS. They've had a lot of matches this year, as we know, that they've lost by narrow margins. This one could have been another one of those, but he took it away from North in this small period of time in the third quarter, and, it was probably best on ground yet again.
Yeah, amazing what he does.
It's quite incredible, isn't it? To another incredible act, and that was on Saturday night or Saturday evening at the Adelaide Oval, and Taylor Walker could not have had a sweeter milestone game. 10 goals, if you don't mind, in game 250. It's the resurgence of this man, Damo. We've spoken about it before.
That goal we just saw there was off his non-preferred foot from 47 metres out on the run around his body. This one, a stead shot, normal style for him, from 50 plus out, just straight through. They weren't the greatest gimme goals. They were hard goals to kick. Again, it is contextual against the West Coast Eagles.
Yeah, there are days where you go, I'm going to fill my boots. And you see nice and early that the opposition's not going too well and you say, I'm going to cash in today. And that's what Tex certainly did.
How many times did you cash in?
Only 3 times. Did I kick 10 or more?
Only 3.
Yeah. Kicked that 926 goals. Just said 8 all the time. Just on that, though, Tony Lockett did it 22 times.
Yeah.
10 or more. 10 or more. And Jason Dunstall, 16 times, 10 or more. Not to take away from what Taylor Walker did, but just goes to show that old era was better.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we bring back those old days? Hey, on Saturday night, it was the Tigers who reigned supreme over the Dockers, and the loss was really costly for the Dockers because they'd won 4 games in a row before the bye. They were wanting to maintain the rage. They were missing Sean Darcy, I know that, and the conditions probably favoured Richmond, Lloydie, but can we give them an out for this performance? They probably should have won this game.
Yeah, they should win. Yeah, they want to be at that side they hope they'd be after having a good season last year, but there's just something. As I said, they just don't have the weapons I don't think the top 4 have. They sort of can grind away and have a cracker. Amos kicked another 4, so that was a positive. Yep. They've got a strong midfield, but I just don't think they have the overall weaponry of what the other top 4 sides do, who'll be in prelim weekend.
Richmond got them. I'm not losing any great faith or hope in what the Dockers can do, but I think to Lloydie's point, they're off the pace from the top 4 perspective. But I love their previous month. I'm not going to lose. I don't think they should lose anything out of that. Richmond just clicked, but Richmond's form's been really good. I mean, if you go back to the week that Damien Hardwick stood down, it was a narrow loss, and then McQualter's now taken over for 3 matches. Lost his first game, and it might be his best performance by 10 points to Port Adelaide, and then narrow wins against GWS and Fremantle. I mean, he's mounting a nice case. I just don't know where to rank him in the race to be the permanent replacement for Damien Hardwick, but what he's done in the 3 weeks he's been in charge could only have enhanced that prospect.
And just before we move off the Tigers, obviously Marlon Pickett at the moment has been granted bail after allegedly stealing more than $380,000 during a string of burglaries in December 2022, January 2023. Does he play this week? And more to the point, should he play this week?
Yeah, separate questions, aren't they? As we speak, we don't yet know what Brendan Gale, the Chief Executive Officer of the Tigers, is going to say today when he speaks publicly, and that will be factored in, obviously. I'm of the view now, Nat, that let the courts of the land deal with it. If Marlon Pickett's headspace to play footy, now let's just isolate it to footy for the moment, if it's okay to play, and he does want to play, if that lines up, well, I'd play him this weekend. In terms of the innocence until proven guilty component, I'm actually a strong believer in that. Let the courts deal with it.
Just staggering, though, to think that January in your off-season, if the allegations are correct, that you're doing that. And I also look at the integrity of it. I'm not sure I'd want to play with him this weekend.
It's interesting.
All right, well, let's rewind the clock back to Friday night, and the Power made it 10 wins in a row. They were absolutely flying, and this piece of play against the Bulldogs basically tells the tale of the night. And I guess, Lloydie, it shows us why the Power is just such a force to be reckoned with when they've got Zach Butters running around doing as he pleases. Yeah,
they're like Collingwood. They're just so hard to contain, and now they've got big game players. Like Butters does it every week. Rosie is doing it every week. Horne-Francis isn't as consistent as the other two because he's younger, but moments like this, he's so hard to stop. Boak and Wines are playing such awesome team roles. Lysette's back playing hard, tough footy. And then Charlie Dixon was back. So it's so good for them. To win 10 in a row is a hard thing to do, and they're the real deal. On
the flip side, the Dogs have lost 3 in a row now, and they're a little bit handball happy, don't you think?
Yeah.
What are you concerned about this?
Oh, it was frustrating being there. Aaron Norton's not in good form, but you just be blowing up as a forward saying, just kick the thing. Just give me a chance. All you want is a 1v1 opportunity against your defender. But they just mess around with the footy, and they get so many junk disposed. 2 weeks in a row, they've had 8 of the top 10 disposal winners, yet they have 100 more disposal but lose a game of footy. It's frustrating that...
When they play like this, I mean, someone they haven't got access to right now in Ed Richards hurts, doesn't he? Because he is cleaner than what we're seeing in this...
Yeah, and he kicks the footy.
And he kicks the footy.
And he kicks the footy. So we saw Hawthorn, and they're getting lauded for the handball, but there's a balance. You've got to get the balance right of knowing when to handball and when to kick, and they're handballing too often. And
I think Jason Johannesson, another absentee, who's making this style of play look pretty bad against a high-quality opponent.
Well, hopefully the Dogs can turn it around. That's 3 losses in a row. It's now time, though, for Quick Gives. And, Lloydie, I start with you. What do you believe is a greater achievement for a player, winning an All-Australian Guernsey or a club best and fairest?
Nat, I'd won some All-Aus, but never won a best and fairest. So I think a greater is a best and fairest than an All-Australian. Damo, to you, were you surprised Freo gave Nat Fyfe and Michael Walters 2-year deals?
Yeah, it was. It doesn't mean I don't think they should play into 2025, but that's on the basis of 2024 form warranting it, and I would have done it that way as opposed to the way they did do it. I love both those players. Nat, will Novak Djokovic ever be loved by Aussie tennis fans as much as Federer and Nadal?
Never. He will never, ever be the GOAT. Federer is the GOAT.
The stats say he is, Nat.
He's not the GOAT. It's more than just the stats. It's who you are, your character, all of that stuff. Let's not get into it. Lloydie, who is the best assistant coach you've encountered in your career?
Mark Harvey was the best. He had an amazing ability to hit me between the eyes, but also tell me what I could do to play a better game the week after. He was outstanding. Today, Mo, are you no longer a fan of the Gawn-Grundy ruck combo?
No, well, they've got the balance right. I made those comments in a questioning sense, Lordo, 2 weeks ago. What has happened? I reckon Max Gawn's reassumed the rightful balance in that relationship, and he's the 6th All-Australian out of the past 7 seasons, and I reckon they've got it right. Nat, should player wages be made public?
The nosy Parker in me says yes, but I think it's none of our business, really, so it's a no from me.
Yes, it is. Of course it's
it's
We spend the entire year working out what players are on and what they're worth.
it. You know, that's
Do you
private.
want to hear it, Damo?
It's a different conversation, but when Nat says it's none of our business, it is our business. We speculate on it.
Would you give up your wage if they gave
exactly.
up theirs?
I'll give up my wage if the players do. There you
Would
go.
you?
If the players do, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'd love to see that.
I want to hear
We
it
might be
now,
having
yeah.
some conversations.
Would you
at
get
a
the
higher
cashies
level.
you get?
And Lloydie, last one for you. Who wins the Ashes and what will the scoreline be?
Aussies 3-2, Nat.
Okay, I like it. Time now for our Crypto Brave play. And we've got a couple this week. We start with Will Day, who is my favourite Hawk, and he hurt his shoulder there.
He's your favourite, yeah?
Yeah, he's my favourite.
Okay.
And then he goes back and does this, and this is one of the reasons why he is one of my favourites. Look at the courage there. And
Putting
he
together
hurt
a
his
very
shoulder.
nice season.
Skillful and tough. It's rare that players have all of that.
And then what about this one? Lockie Hunter and Will Hoskin-Elliott yesterday. I was there and I physically felt that from the crowd. That was a hard hit, Damo.
Yeah, look, there's some commentary around, Will Hoskin-Elliott not doing what he may have should have done. I'm a bit sympathetic to him, Nat and Lloydie, as to, I think in that split second he felt, if I go hard here, I'm going to be suspended by the match review office. Yeah, so I'm sympathetic to him.
They both went hard at the footy. And it was a symbolic moment, though, for Melbourne.
It was.
It lifted the players all around them with that Hunter effort.
And a bold play before we go. Check out this crafty smother from Todd Goldstein, putting that foot to good use while lying. You've got to watch the replay. He actually means this. Look at
Did you
that.
get a disposal for that?
Is it a disposal or
Is
a
it a
smother?
kick?
Or both?
A kick or a smother? All right, that is all we have time for on Access All Areas this week. Don't forget, next week we'll be back to our Monday time slot. Enjoy the rest of your week.